Hello and welcome. Now we're going to start making this into a real payment solution for our app. We want to be able to save a card, and we want to be able to make a customer so that they can retrieve their card information and use it on our website whenever they want to. So let's get started on that. You want to head into your controller, into your Stripe controller, and after single charge, we're going to export something else. It's going to be called save card and charge. That's exactly what we'll be doing. It's an async request response, and we'll point to a fat arrow function. One quick note, the Stripe API doesn't need the name on the card, which is actually pretty great and gives us less fields to deal with. Right now, the name wasn't coming through. I made a note in the last video that will fix that, but actually if we did fix it, we would have run into an error because they do not take name as a field. So we can get rid of name here, and we can get rid of name here, and this will work just fine. So let's go back to save card and charge and do a little work. So the first thing I want to do is just steal this entire first two lines. It's about the same. So we'll steal those two, paste them in here. We have the token, the total, the description. We're also going to need the cart. We're going to want to know what orders were placed and what were in those orders, and we'll keep that on the user's schema. We'll have a orders array. We'll also have a courses owned array, the Stripe ID. So there are a few things to add to the user as well as we keep moving forward. So that's why we're taking the cart, because we want to be able to have an orders array that has all the past orders this person has ordered from our website. Now Stripe has something called a Stripe ID. We're going to let Stripe ID, and we're just going to take that off of the request.body. Now there might not be a Stripe ID. Of course there will not be a Stripe ID the first time this happens. We want to make a customer and then take that Stripe ID and put it right here where the Stripe ID will be. Right now it's empty, which will be undefined and come back falsy. So this would just be an undefined value that we set off with the title Stripe ID. Now, how do we get a Stripe ID from Stripe? We're going to set up a try catch, and in the try block is where we'll do the Stripe ID. So if there is no Stripe ID, here's what we'll do. The customer is going to equal await stripe.customer.create. So we'll create a customer and we'll store it within this variable customer right here, and we should let that first. Let me just let customer. And next what we'll do is we'll take the Stripe ID, which we made up here and right now is pointing to nothing, it's just undefined, and we'll set that equal to the customer.id, which will be basically the Stripe ID. So that's how we get that. Now, the next thing to do outside of that if, we're going to create a source. So const source, set that equal to await stripe.customer.create source. And that's one word, create source. And inside of there, we'll pass in the Stripe ID that we just got back. And we'll have the source, which will be, let me get this out of our way, which will be a source token.id. And remember what the token is. It comes from the front. We used it right here when we did the one-time payments. Now that we have a source, we can go down a bit more and make a const called status. The status will await the Stripe, and we've done this before pretty much, .charges.create. Now in stripe.charges.create, we'll open up an object inside of that, and we want an amount, which will be the amount. And I know I'm long-handing these, but I just prefer it for what we're doing right now. I like to define everything when we're dealing with people's money. Currency will be USD. Get that on the same line. Customer. Now this is important, and this is different than what we did over here, because we're going to be charging the customer here. So the customer needs to be the Stripe ID. That's the ID of that customer. The description The description will be the description. We passed that in. And finally, we have the source. The source is what we're going to charge, which is going to be the source.id, which we'll get back from right here. Now, after that, we need to save this in our database, which we'll do with a function we've yet to write called server work. Inside of there, just pass request, response, customer, and cart. We need that cart in order to make that orders array right here. Put that cart inside of the order. Finally, we are going to do our res.status, and that will be 200.json, and we'll send back there is the status. Status is what we got right here. So that goes back to the front end, and that's how we finish our payment. If we have an error, we're simply going to console.log the ERR error, and we will res.status. That will be err.status code.json. That will be err.message. So we could send back the status code and the message if we have an error. Now we have quite a bit here and it's a lot of work. Let's talk through it real quick. We're going to take in the token, total, description, and cart like we did up here, except we didn't take the cart. We're going to get our Stripe ID from the request.body. Now, if a Stripe ID isn't included, we're going to get this Stripe ID with this if right here. We're going to let customer await creating this customer, and then we're going to set this Stripe ID equal to the customer.id. The source will await stripe.customer.create source. We'll give them that Stripe ID, that's the customer's ID, and what we want the source to be created with, which will be the token from the card that we get from the front end. Then we'll have this const called status, and that awaits the actual charge, where we charge the source rather than the token like we did up here. So we're going to be able to charge the source.id instead, and we'll have a saved card as well. Now we want to put this into our database, not just into Stripe. We want to know what was in their cart, what their order was. So let's do that work now. We'll head up to the top. This won't be an export. This is just going to be just in this file. So const server work. We're also going to need to bring in user. Let me do that real quick. Const user equals require ... and we need schemas, there you are, and then user. Perfect. Now server work, that is going to be async. It'll take in the request, the response, the customer, and the cart. That's everything we should need to get us started. We'll have a const, we'll pull off the ID from the request.user. Now here's another thing that we're going to set up. There is no request.user, but we're going to set this up in a way that I think is pretty clever and I think you're going to like, and it'll save us time in the future. So right now I know you don't have a request.user, and this might seem a little confusing, but we'll go to this next. Okay, so we're going to do now the const user will equal await, and we could have user.findById, and when we find it by the ID, we're just going to put in basically the ID that we pulled off the request.user. Again, this will be put on here by a function that we have not written yet. So if no user dot stripe ID user dot stripe ID is going to equal the customer dot ID. So all we're saying here is if we don't already have a Stripe ID in here, I want to take the customer ID, which we're getting back from this function, save card and charge. We're getting back customer when we create a customer. We want that customer ID to be the Stripe ID. So we're setting in the database that we're going to have a Stripe ID now. But we have a few more things to do before we save this. So we pulled out the user, and now we added this Stripe ID if it needs to be added. Now we need to let course IDs. That will equal just an empty array. So these will be the IDs that are on each one of the courses over here. And they will also be in our database, and we will actually be putting all these into our database within the next lesson or two. So let's make an array of the course IDs. So we'll just have to go through the cart here. We'll say for will let I equal 0, while I is less than cart.length. We'll have I plus plus. And then we could do all of our work inside of here. It's pretty simple. We just want to say course IDs dot push, and inside of there cart at I dot underscore ID. So as we go through each element of the cart, we'll take the ID and we'll store it in course IDs. Now after that, we'll have user dot courses owned. That will be another property of the user right here, courses owned, an array of the courses owned, the course IDs as we're calling them. That will equal dot 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 user dot courses owned. And we could comment to spreading out the course IDs as well. So now we'll have the courses owned not only be what was there already, but the course IDs that we pulled from up there. Okay, that's all set. Now here's a really important piece of MongoDB. When we're updating an array, you want to say user.mark, and not always user, whatever collection you have here. We want mark modified. If we mark modified the courses owned, we know that it's going to look at this and compare a little more so we don't miss any IDs. And that can happen, so do pay attention to this, please. Next, we're going to have the user.orders, and that'll be equal to an array with user.orders, so everything that was already in there, and then we'll just comment to the cart. That'll be our next order put into the array. Now again, user.mark modified, and what we're marking modified this time is orders. Now we can await user.save, and we saved this entry after we did these changes to the user. Now this is everything that we want to do here, but let's talk a little bit more about Scss and Mongoose and see what we can do in order to get this request.user attached to the request. What I would like to do is bring up the auth controller, because we have something very similar to what we'll need. In the auth controller, if we head down to the bottom, we're going to see something called check user cred. Now, check user cred checks the credentials to make sure the user has a token and automatically logs that user in. What we want to do instead is we want to take that token and grab the user off of it so that the user is available within the request. And I think it's best to just show you this in code because it gets confusing to say. Right now we have check user cred. We're going to make this a little simpler with a helper function, const token checker. Now, token checker will be an async request response and next. And inside of there is where we're actually going to do all the logic from check user cred. So we'll take that all the way down to here, cut it out, and paste it into here. Now everything in here is what we need in our token checker, but we do need to return something from the function. So let's return the user that we get right from here. So there's our user. Now we'll just need a catch as well. So just catch yourself in ERR, and inside of there, let me grab that. And inside of the catch, we will do a next with the ERR error. So this refactor is almost finished. We'll head down here to check user cred, and we'll get rid of the catch. We no longer need that. We'll be doing no try above it. All we'll be doing is, let me head up to what we called it, token checker. Okay, so I'm gonna grab token checker, and I'm going to have down here, const user equals await token checker, and then we'll put in the request, the response, and the next. We'll hand that to it. And that should do what we want there. I have an extra curly bracket there, and that's probably because I didn't delete it when I deleted the catch. Now, this looks like we just separated the logic, which is all that we did. But what we really need to do is have a different function. Instead of just to check user cred, we're going to have a different export that uses the same logic. So exports add user to request. That will be in async. And then request, response, next. I hope you're getting used to this. And inside of there, there's a const called user, which will await token checker with the same stuff. I'm just going to grab it. Now in this middleware function, the next thing we'll do is say request.user equals user. Now we have that user there, and the next thing we want to do is, since this is a middleware, next, and invoke it, and don't put anything inside of it, otherwise it'll be seen as an error. So just next, and we're good to go. What this is doing here is taking the token, the JSON web token, it's taking the user off of the token, the user ID, so we could find the user by ID in token checker, which will be right here. We're finding by ID the user, and then when we get the user back and add user to request, we're attaching the user as request.user, and that's how we're going to be able to get user and every one of our functions after this. So let's set this up now in our Stripe controller. Sorry, not Stripe controller. We have to go down to routes and Stripe routes. That's what I want to get to. So inside of Stripe routes, we're going to bring this in const auth controller that will equal require, and then we just have to find it. So I think it's up 1 to controllers. Okay. Auth controller. Now, we have this single charge route. We'll leave that one alone for now, even though we will fix that as well. We're going to have another route, and it's simply going to be save card and charge. We have our save card and charge route, which will also be a post. It will take in the Stripe controller dot save card and charge. Perfect. Now, before save card and charge, we want to hit our middleware, which attaches the user to the request. So router.use and auth controller.add user to request. So what'll happen is we'll get the request, we will hit this function first, which adds the user to the request, and then we'll hit this function, which saves the card and charges it. And we wrote both of those functions today. I know there are a lot of moving pieces, but that's because our project is getting way more advanced. Just follow along and everything will make sense as we keep going. Now let's set up that user schema. We know what we want to add here. We have the Stripe ID, courses owned, and orders, but how do we add that in? So after clearance, I'll get started. We have a clearance ending here, and the next thing we'll have is the Stripe ID. So Stripe ID is a pretty simple one. We'll just open it up. The type will be a string, and the default will just be an empty string for the Stripe ID. Comment to the next one. It'll be courses owned. So these are the courses that were purchased. Now you want an array here, and inside the array, just open up an object and write type. And here's a new type for us, mongoose.schema.object ID. So it's a Mongoose schema object ID, and we know what they look like. They look like these. Here's an object ID. We also have to give it a reference. So the ref will be to courses. I'm sorry, course, not courses. We haven't made this yet, so of course we could have named it courses, but I'd rather not. I'd rather keep it as course. And finally, we have the orders. So after this, we'll have orders. This one might look complicated, but it's pretty simple. So we'll have an array, and inside of there will be an array of type objects. So there we go. It'll be, and the orders will be an order array, and each order is an array containing objects, and that's really what I'm saying right here. Now we're referencing a schema that we haven't made yet, this course schema. So now let's make that schema that we need in schemas, and we will call it course.js. Inside of course.js, we'll start right with importing Mongoose. So const mongoose equals require mongoose. There it is. Now const course schema equals new mongoose dot schema. All right, let's define that schema. It'll have a title. Every course has a title. And you can actually see all these things in the dummy data if you want to see how I designed it. The title will be a string. It will be required, yes. And we'll have true, comma, a title is required. Next, we'll move on to the img, the image. Now, the image will be a type of string again. Let's move on to the next one, which is author. The author will be type string. We can shorthand this a bit, but I think it's good to get used to doing this way first. Now, price will be a type of number. Require. We're definitely going to need a price on everything. So true, a price is required. Next, we'll move on to the sale opt-in. In the sale opt-in, real simple, of type Boolean. And we're going to default to true. So it's going to be true unless we say otherwise. Now we'll have the position type number. All right, let's keep it going. We have length, and we're almost done here. Length, we'll give that a type of string. And we'll give it a default of varies in case someone doesn't put in the length of their course. Coming down to access type. So access type, we're going to set that as type string and default lifetime access. Next, we'll head to, well, after that one, head to certification. Certification, there we go. And certification will have a type of string, a default of true. So certification is taken care of. We'll have add text, and I swear we're almost done, I promise. A type of string, a required of true, and add text is required. Finally, we have features. Type of array and required again. It'll be true. We do need features, and features are required. Okay, great. So now we have that all set up. I hope I didn't make too many typos. It looks like looks okay to me right now. I guess when we get started, I'll see if there's any problems. After this, we'll make a const called course that will equal mongoose dot model. And inside of that, you just want to put course, a string, and then course schema. Okay, so now we're setting course to be equal to this course schema. And then we want to module.export equal to course, what we put right here. So now we've made what a course looks like right in our data here. Now, unfortunately, we don't have an ability to add courses to our project, but I'm going to write a quick script for that, and we're going to start with that one in the next video. I'll have a file for you with all the courses that we're going to use, and we're going to be able to import it right into your database and get moving on the rest of this. I know we did quite a bit of code with really minimal payoff, but if you've been with me this long, you know that we're building up to something very, very cool, and we're going to see it very soon. So follow me to the next video and keep coding.